Hi, everybody. My name's Pete Gore. I am the head of product management for Argenteel. A little bit about myself. Until recently, I had spent 24 years at Cisco, leading all of their breaking edge technologies. Um, with the last few years focused around automation, orchestration, and AI, talking to customers, helping customers with their automation strategy. So, with that said, what I'd like to do right now is talk about how to drive your automation strategy, some of the benefits of business of orchestration inside your environment. We're going to not really focus on automation. Those are in past presentations that we've presented on. And so we're going to focus on orchestration. We will have some use cases at the end. We'll go through getting started. So how do you get started on this wonderful journey? And then at the time, if there's time at the end, we can talk about how to, the future of automation, what we see coming down the pike, and some of the additional topics that the world of automation and AI can bring to our wonderful environments. So thank you for joining me, and I will get started. So just a quick introduction, automation and orchestration. Automation, although we're not going to be focused on it, is for task-based automation, right? So restarting a service, rebooting a server, things like that, right? When we talk about orchestration, this is where processes come into play. Those tasks that are done in a particular order, certain security groups, tools, role assignments, permissions. Orchestration tools use automation to create those processes, right? That we can order individual tasks in the automation world to actually go and create things that we need, i.e. deploying applications, spinning up automation of virtual machines, spinning up load balancing, things like that. So that's our definition. Feel free to chime in. More than happy to discuss. But for this presentation, those are kind of the definitions that we'll be going through. With regards to questions, please feel free to jump in. Would love to make this interactive. We do have a chat box as part of the presentation, so please feel free to use it, and we will address the questions as we go. So, what is the definition of orchestration? Orchestration is, as we just discussed, coordinating different processes, tasks, and services within inside the IT environment, right? So why do you want to automate? Well, it reduces manual intervention inside your environment, brings in centralized control. You're able to leverage tried and true processes that you've tested out inside your environment, and you're able to do it faster, right? So you're able to drive capabilities within inside your orchestration, which will succeed in faster time to market, lower operational controls, right? So OpEx, and standardization across your environment. So deploying the same thing each time in a consistent fashion, and then being able to post-check that to make sure that it all went out correctly and that what you were expecting to happen has actually happened. So one of the things we'll talk about as we go through here, obviously the different components to orchestration, task-based, which is more around automation, workflow management, which is where we're getting into orchestration and we're building the workflows for our environment, and then the centralized control that we talked about. So as you're deploying and you're moving into this world, what are some of the key questions that you need to ask yourself, right? So the first question is, what am I trying to do? What am I trying to deliver to the organization, right? Taking a look at what am I currently doing? What is the different logic? Because we like to say, if you don't change your operational processes, you just end up doing bad things faster. And so what is it I'm trying to do? What is the logic behind what you're doing today? And how does that logic need to change? And then the automation maturity, we'll talk about that in a few minutes. And then what do I need to happen? What skill sets do I need to bring into the organization? What tool sets do I need to bring into the organization? All of these different things need to be addressed as you approach your automation journey. Business impacts, there's always positive impacts to orchestration, right? Streamlining of operations, which we've already talked about. How many of you have technical debt inside your organization, right? Think about that for a second and think about how can I possibly reduce that technical debt? Well, you can look at standardization of processes. You can look at creating scripts for your environment that can be leveraged in infrastructure as code. Again, we can talk about version control and the ability to deploy in a consistent fashion. And then driving scalability. Because you can do these things, you're able to now scale and operate at the speed of code. You're able to drive your environment to much greater heights in a much faster way of doing this. So these are just some of the business impacts. Now let's think about what are some of the complexities of getting there, right? So if we listen to Gartner, they're saying 75% of companies that face these complexities, as they drive towards the transformation of their environment and overcome some of these complexities, they're able to drive towards that automation in a much more successful fashion, right? So some of the complexities, I'm sure many of you have multi-cloud environments, hybrid environments. I'm sure you're not one vendor, so you're probably not just Cisco or not just Juniper. You're not just one vendor for a server environment, or maybe you are, right? And so how do you deploy that infrastructure in a much faster, in a much more reliable fashion without incurring some of these pain points, right? Higher operational costs due to training needs, due to having to deliver services more slowly, because you need to customize each environment, or each environment is actually customized, and you need to handle those snowflakes inside your environment in a way that keeps your infrastructure running. But then that's also going to drive up your operational costs, because now you need to be able to handle those operational environments and those individual snowflakes, and trust the fact that your operations staff has to go find the documentation to handle that individual environment and the way it was deployed. Obviously, if you have a lot of snowflakes inside your environment, there's going to be a lot of manual intervention and troubleshooting inside your environment, because you can't automate in a scalable fashion that will result in consistent algorithms that will allow you to troubleshoot your environment. And so that's also going to stop you from scaling. So the maturity model that we talked about, for those of you that were on previous calls, you will have seen this before. But the idea here is to be able to drive up this maturity model, which will then start allowing you to see those OpEx and CapEx savings as you rise up through the maturity model. In my experience dealing with all the customers that I was working with when I was at Cisco, most customers even in today's day and age are around about a 1, low 2, right? So they're still in an ad hoc fashion. They're still creating one-off scripts that are residing on people's desktops, or they're getting to a point where they are able to drive projects. But again, it's still a very manual approach, right? They're still looking to drive runbook automation. They're trying to get to orchestration, but they're just not there yet. And so they are seeing some of those benefit gains, as we see at the bottom, 5 to 10% benefit gains. However, as we drive further up, that enables us to drive to an environment where we're able to scale, we're able to train our people, and allow the folks that we do have to focus on more strategic activities inside their environments. So how do we get started, right? We'll actually cover this in a lot more depth in the next couple of slides. But generally, the way I would start around a strategic environment with a customer is to start drawing out this framework, right? So how do I take all of my automation platforms, all of my element managers, which you see at the bottom there, right? Cisco, Aruba, F5, etc. How do I take all of those and integrate that into my environment? How do I bring those up into my cross-domain environment and automation platforms that can go and talk to these different element managers and orchestrate them into a consistent workflow? How do I take those and gather telemetry from the infrastructure, right? Where do I take that telemetry and where do I feed it and what do I do with it? This is all part of our overall strategy that needs to be developed as you move forwards inside this journey that you're looking at. Of course, security is a huge player in this area. And I'd be very surprised if you're not running several of these systems already inside your environment, right? And again, this ties back to the level 2 of the maturity model. So you have these tools, you have the capabilities inside your environment. Now it's a case of figuring out how to do it. How do you take your people that have standardized day jobs and say, okay, you now do automation. I need you to be able to do this, this, and this, right? And we'll talk about what this, and this is in a few minutes. So building out this environment gives you a good understanding of your different domains, your different verticals, right, which is represented across the bottom there. And then understanding what is your ITSM solution. Here we're representing BMC. Do you have GitHub? Do you have Jenkins? Do you have a multitude of different tools? Because most customers really do. So documenting those out, how do I take my cross-domain platforms and ensure that I just don't have overlap inside those environments, right? As you can see there, we have Adept, which is the Argenteel solution, but we also have Ansible, we have NetBrain, we have SaltStack, we have Terraform. A lot of these platforms overlap with each other, causing you CapEx costs, or you're using the freeware version. And as a result, you're also leveraging a lot of OpEx in this environment because now you have to train people on how to go use these individual platforms. So what we'll talk about as we move forward is simplifying this environment, getting down to one, maybe two cross-domain solutions, and how that can reduce your OpEx and how that can reduce and improve your flexibility across your environment. Is there any questions at this point? I'm gonna go with no. Okay, so how do we get started on this journey, right? So one of the things we have to think about for strategies around the implementation of this orchestration is, where do I want to look, right? What would be high impact areas for my network time, right? Or for my efforts to justify this? And that's going to depend largely on what kind of space you're in. Are you in the retail space? Are you in the manufacturing space? Are you in the financial space? And so as you determine those, what are going to be the things that you want to adopt, right? Everybody has compliance issues. Depending on the space that you're in, those compliance issues are going to change, but you're going to have compliance. And we'll look at the compliance use case towards the end. But making sure that you can run those compliance reports as and when needed, and that they don't take you a full month to make that happen. If you're in the retail space and it's a holiday season, how do I take that and adopt an orchestration platform that allows me to deploy additional infrastructure like load balancers, right? So if I've got a front-end website that I'm spinning up, how do I handle that front-end website over a holiday season where, all of a sudden people are hitting my website and because it's ultra popular and I just don't have the capacity inside my infrastructure to handle those additional hits? Well, I can drive that in an orchestrated fashion based on real-time response and telemetry coming from the infrastructure. I can spin up additional load balancers. I can spin up additional web servers, right? And the applications that go with those, so that I can now orchestrate those data workflows. And then when that demand dies off, I'm able to decommission those additional devices. So I'm no longer using additional power and air and cooling and compute. And then monitoring, right? So how do I know to spin up these additional resources, this additional infrastructure? Well, that's going to be through monitoring and analytics and being proactive inside my environment. And that's going to be data-driven monitoring tools to drive triggers, which are then going to kick off our automation for us. So how do I get to this phase? Well, I need to have a vision, right? This is the non-sexy side of automation. This is before you can ever hit the keyboard. These are the things that you really must consider, because if you don't, you're just going to end up with what we like to term automation decimation, the ability to hit go and then sit there and then watch your infrastructure die. And unfortunately, I've seen many customers do this. So creating a vision, right? What is your vision around automation? Is it just your network? Is it full stack? Is it security? Is it just for operations? And so creating that vision, documenting that vision, so as an organization, Everybody's on track, everybody's in line with that vision and able to drive towards it. So from an objectives perspective, what are my overall objectives, right? So we break those down based on the vision that we're looking for, and how do we handle that as we move forwards, right? The strategy. So now that I have my objectives, I have my vision, how am I actually going to reach those objectives? What is the strategy of how I'm going to make that happen? That's a very key aspect. A lot of customers and a lot of companies overstep this area. They think, I have a strategy. It's to automate everything. Guys, that's not a strategy, right? That's an objective. It's a admirable objective, but it's not a strategy. And so you have to look at, how am I going to do things? How do I achieve these objectives that I've now laid out that are based on my overall vision? And now that I've got that overall strategy, what's the plan, right? So what is my short-term plan? Am I leveraging a waterfall methodology, or am I using an agile methodology? I would strongly suggest an agile methodology. You're going to see much faster business gains, right? Where you're able to deploy in macro solutions across your environment. So you're not waiting for that big bang, right? If it's software code upgrades, I'm not waiting until I've figured out a coding solution to solve my entire infrastructure. I'm going to start with specific models on my infrastructure, and that could be objective A, right? Application code upgrades or server upgrades, right? That could be objective B. So what are my short-term plans to go and do that? And they could be as simple as documenting operating systems, documenting operating versions. And that's going to come from the telemetry and the monitoring and the data-driven decisions that we were discussing a few seconds ago. So as you delve into this implementation strategy, right? So now that you have your hows, now you're going to start looking at, what is my overall action plan that I'm operating against, right? So I've got my strategic imperatives. I know what I want to achieve, and I'm now documenting and designing to those initiatives. So I have a design, I have a build, I have a test. And now I'm able to roll that into a pilot phase where I'm actually able to go prove the value of what I've done, make sure that it works, associate a quick win, right? Something for senior leaders to be able to report up to senior executives, where they can say, we did XYZ, it resulted in this, and this is the scale that we're now able to achieve. These are the cost savings that we were able to achieve, and this is the standardization that we were able to achieve. Here's the positive impact for the business overall. Once that's been done, now you're able to scale that solution out. As part of your scaling, you're going to learn, you're going to optimize that environment, right? So there's always lessons learned as you move forwards. And from there, you're going to do your business validation, provide governance and oversight, track the issues, and then you're going to start again and proceed with the next one. So what are some of the pitfalls? I've seen a lot of customers really over-engineer the solution, right? Complex orchestration, multiple tool sets, cumbersome workflows. The challenge here is, how do you maintain things that have been created, and how do you pass them on, right? We don't all stay around forever. And so the documentation of that environment, overly complex environments that need to be maintained and modified over time, have to be supportable, right? So how do you take that to the next phase? How do you document it? How do you make it so that somebody else can step in and fill your shoes without providing too complex? You want to keep it simple, right? Simple rules in this world. And then standardization, right? So different processes, different tools across different teams and different verticals. One team using Adept, one team using Ansible, one team using Terraform, one team using NetBrain. Causes for problems, right? How do you simplify OpEx when you're running multiple different tools across multiple different environments that have to be able to interact with each other? So what do I do here? So I need to, again, set the clear goals and objectives, which we set in the previous slides, right? We set the vision, we set the objectives, we set the strategy, and then we came up about how to do it. Make sure that we're talking across verticals so that we're able to talk cross-platform and cross-tool, right? Make sure that as we're dividing and defining that platform that we looked at earlier from a framework perspective, we're able to look at the different diverse systems, the languages, the platforms that we have inside of our environment today, and create those workflows that everybody can look at, everybody can support, and that they have access to. When we look at a simple statistic at the bottom, right, orchestration projects fail due to the lack of that defined success and then poor stakeholders. So lack of support at the executive level is also another key reason for failure. 45%, right? That's almost 50, that's almost half of the people available here are going to fail doing this. If I was to point fingers, which I'm not, at their orchestration projects because of lacking of not following this very simple process for you guys to follow, right? So think about that. Think about the objectives. Think about the goals that you want and how you're going to do it. If you're already on this journey, what are some of the things that you can change? Have you already got a strategy in place? Is it working? And if it's not, consider that. How do we change that? How do we move that forward? What would be a way to standardize our environment? Are we using too many tools, etc.? Right? And like I said, guys, feel free to jump in with questions here. Okay, so what are some of the best practices here? Standardized templates, right? We've hit on this, or I've hit on this several times already, right? Usual things, right? Consistency will help drive reduce setup time across the environment. Again, with standardization, right? Across team verticals. So involve your security team, involve your development teams, involve your operations team. One thing I always used to talk about with customers was their operations team. They're the guys that have to operate this and drive this environment that our really smart engineers go off and create, right? They're the guys who are sitting there at midnight trying to use what it is that the engineers have created. A lot of times, if there's too many tools, too many screens, no single pane of glass, that's where they get bogged down. And that's where the smart guys start getting the phone calls. That's where the bosses start getting the phone calls, right? Because they need to make decisions in real time to bring the infrastructure back up because it was largely too complicated. Regular monitor, right? Define your monitoring statistics and define your KPIs, and then adjust your workflows as needed. When things break those KPIs, make sure that that infrastructure and that metadata is coming back off of the infrastructure into your monitoring platform, that you have business rules created around those, and what to do when you hit those additional issues as you go across your infrastructure. Have those open maintenance tickets, have those maintenance tickets then communicate down to your orchestration engine and take action inside your infrastructure in a proactive fashion. And then, like we talked about earlier, phased approach, right? Don't go with the Big Bang Theory. It never works. Well, I can't say never, but the point is you want quick wins. You want to be able to report up to senior execs that you were able to save money, that you were able to successfully automate things that have been pain points up till now, right? Simple things, software alignment across your infrastructure, reduce that technical debt there. Being able to change your SNMP community strings, being able to change your passwords depending on your compliance requirements. And so being able to automate those things, standardizes things, make sure that your CMDBs are up to date with the latest and greatest information. So that if you do have to call into technical support, you have the correct information, you have the correct contract numbers, you have the correct serial numbers, right? And all of this can be achieved as you go through a phased approach. Make sure that you're making sure that everything is working and that everything is being done in the correct fashion. And so you'll actually achieve a much faster return on investment, as it says there, 20% faster by doing a scaled out as opposed to a Big Bang Theory. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys. Okay, so what I want to do is talk about Adept for a few seconds. So the platform, an orchestration platform, we did coin the phrase to deploy any technology with one methodology. As you can see, we cover a multitude of different cloud platforms, a lot of the common ones that are out there. all the different operating systems that you're aware of that you could potentially be running inside your environment, and a multitude of different technologies, right? So the different technologies that we're looking at here, from Rancher to Docker, Palo Alto, F5, Microsoft, Cisco, right? All of these different technologies we're able to interact with and automate and handle some of the complexities that we've been dealing about in a single orchestration engine, which is allowing you to then remove and reduce those operational expenditures as well as the CapEx inside your environment. And then one of the things we'll talk about in a few minutes, the agnostic capabilities from a language perspective and coding perspective, right? Adept is one of the only platforms out there that is truly multilingual. It can pull in and create workflows from all of these different coding programs, and we're able to expand on that as we go forwards. Or if you have a specific request, we can take that over to our development team and have them focus on that and turn that around within a matter of weeks. If you think about the ability to have an agnostic tool inside, agnostic language tool inside your environment, the ability to scale that, the ability to pull in from different verticals who have been using different languages and different operating systems up to now, and be able to combine all of those into a single workflow seamlessly, the value of that, I think, speaks for itself. All right, so if we think about some of the examples that we have when we're thinking about automation, right, the ability to drive efficiency and, of course, profits, right, by driving down those operational costs. Specifically to airports, we think about commuters, sorry, not just computers, increasing day by day. Airports are expanding capacity. Checking in, I mean, that's pretty old school right now, right? Everybody's pretty much familiar with the check-in kiosks, where you can simply walk up, type in a little bit of information, it checks you into the flight. It can even check your bags for you, spit out the appropriate tags, you attach those to your bags, and off you go, right? So that's pretty much old hat as we go now, from a sequencing and triggering perspective within inside those operations within inside an airport, right? They can even UV to sterilize the different seats within inside of areas. Tag your bags onto the conveyor belt, so on and so forth. One cool thing is Japan is working in the Haneda airport as a multi-language robot that is actually able to interact with passengers and has a direct link to the airline's digital feed at the information counter. People are able to ask for directions, flight information, and the robot is able to understand multiple different languages. Obviously, the goal here is that the passenger's experience will be improved by moving the information to a device that they can interact with, as opposed to standing in lines and waiting for a person. The robot is not going to get frustrated by the simple, the multitude of the same questions, and that hopefully that this interaction is going to be a positive experience for the customer, where they don't have to wait and they can simply move on about their day. How many of you think back to ACL management inside your infrastructure, right? From a networking perspective, when you're thinking about ACLs, you would have your favorite console server, you would tell that into that box, you would look through those 1,000 lines of ACLs that are sitting inside your devices and have to figure out a way of inserting the correct line into that environment to make sure that the traffic is appropriate, making sure that you don't have that good old permit any at the bottom, halfway up your ACL list. And over time, how do you manage that, right? So a lot of customers tend to buy bigger and bigger hardware because they're just simply afraid to go back and touch the ACLs that they have hiding inside their infrastructure because they're not sure what they do, right? So how do you handle that? How do you manage that across an entire infrastructure way? Well, orchestration is the way to go about doing that, right? So as you do software-defined networking across your environment, you're able to then handle your ACLs in an automated fashion. So as you spin up a new network and you want to be able to make sure that that configuration is applied across your infrastructure, you're able to drive that from a portal. If you're turning up an application, all of the dependency mappings within inside that application are detected, and those changes are made across the infrastructure in a unified fashion. The beauty of this is when you decommission that application, all the different routers and firewalls across your organization will then also be updated and remove those different ACLs, right? If there's inconsistency across your organization, then you're able to run those different reports. The ACLs should be in the right way, right? So how do I automatically make sure that I can update that information, make sure that all of the pushes are changed successfully, and be able to test those appropriate changes? And orchestration is a great way to make that happen. Similarly, when you're doing a network migration, so an orchestration engine, these days, if you're going from Juniper to a Cisco device, or from Juniper to an Arista device, or Cisco to an Arista device, how do you make that happen in a fashion that is seamless? How do you make that happen in a self-documenting fashion? How do you make sure that the code is translated correctly from one platform to another? So you can do this in an orchestrated fashion. You can check functionality of the infrastructure as you make this happen as well, right? So you're able to drive your automation. You're able to go pull the configuration from device A that you're moving from. You're then able to put that and apply that to the subsequent device that you're moving to, and then ability to overcome that technical debt, right? The skill set curve of going from one vendor to another is handled because you're able to drive this in an automated fashion, right? You don't no longer need CLI jockeys. You're able to do it at the orchestration level in an abstracted fashion. Another big thing that a lot of people work on and a lot of people suffer from is going to be compliance, right? So how do I make sure that my environment is compliant? Again, it's going to depend on your organization. But you're going to have to leverage automation within inside your environment. So to start with device configurations and software versions that are deployed. This will allow for non-compliance devices to be identified and then remediated. If we look at a couple of examples here, I worked with a healthcare environment where a HIPAA compliance study was performed each year until we went in and automated this environment. It used to take 160 hours, so a working man-month, to actually complete this environment compliance report. So with the aid of automation, we were able to operate and drive different tool sets inside their environment. We're now able to complete this report in only 4 hours using the same management platforms in use within the customer's networks today. Huge level of man savings, and woman savings, driving down OpEx inside the environment, right? And saving some poor soul a lot of time from diving through logs, etc. Another automation issue here, software upgrades across an environment, right? So one customer, we worked with a customer, they were driving their environment. It was taking them 85 change windows to go across their infrastructure, right? Through the use of automation, we were able to reduce that down to 28 windows. I think the results here speak for themselves, right? But another cool thing when you start thinking about compliance checks is it's not just software upgrades. It's not just compliance reports. You can automate the completion, right? So how do I drive this from an orchestration perspective? Look at my infrastructure, look at my devices, all of my devices across the infrastructure, what they're doing. Are they in date? Are they out of date? Are they up to date on their software? Are my device templates applied consistently across the different devices? And so we're able to run our compliance report, which then will drive against all the different logs. We're able to analyze those in a automated fashion, update different databases, configure everything else, and then produce that overall report. And again, in the previous example against HIPAA, that was done in a 4-hour period. So very powerful, very, very much something that you need to think about depending on your environment and depending on what you're looking to get done. So a lot of you are sitting there thinking, okay, well, how do I do this, Pete, right? I've got an existing environment. I've got a brownfield fashion. Well, hopefully, as we've gone through this session, we've kind of answered some of those questions for you. It is definitely done in a pilot-driven fashion, right? So in a modular design, we want a scalable infrastructure. And again, part of that plan is, how do I add to that infrastructure? How do I bring additional information and different tool sets in, and making sure that they are compliant with the infrastructure that I have? A lot of issues that I see are out there is a lot of customers don't want to go out and hire a whole bunch of network developers, right? So coming in the environment is, or in the automation world, in the orchestration world, is no code, low code platforms, right? UI interface based things where users are able to drag and drop onto a specific environment based on what they want to do. And then the system, that platform, will then actually create the code for them on the back end, which will then allow them to go and create those additional workflows. This is very much coming. If you're already using one of these systems, congratulations. If you're not, it's definitely something you want to think about, right? So how can I automate my environment without having to go out and hire a bunch of developers, in a fashion that makes sense, that works for your individual industry, and is interoperable? And then how do you leverage a platform such as Adept and deploy that infrastructure across? So we touched on this earlier from an agnostic perspective. Agnostic tools help unify the IT, as we're saying here. Why does it do that? Well, we're able to streamline workflows, reducing rework across existing code bases. A lot of customers, when they've been writing code, or people inside their organization have been writing code for a while, but they've been doing it in Perl, or they've been doing it in Java, or they've been doing it in Ansible. Been doing it in Python. So how do I reuse all of that existing IC and IP, and how do I drive that into new workflows that enable me to then leverage that environment? So without having to rewrite things and port different code to different languages. Obviously, that's going to drive cost efficiency if I can rework the existing base, but it also reduces my cost of training. I don't have to come into somebody and tell hundreds, if not thousands of people that now they have to learn this new language because this is the new language that we have decided on. And also, if we have an agnostic platform, again, we talk about future proofing, right? So automation and orchestration is constantly evolving with the introduction of AI. It's definitely evolving faster and faster. And so an agnostic language toolset should be very much part of your infrastructure platform that you want to think about. So when we think about future of automation, what is coming, right? So this is just some of the things that I perceive, and again, very much open to questions or thoughts about this. But hyper automation, the type of automation is going to pull all of these different things and different capabilities and methodologies of automation with the use of AI and other advanced technologies, and build them into an overall solution where we can do true end-to-end. Cognitive automation, AI, RPAs, complex knowledge-based tasks, right? So able to learn and reason with us and adapt to changing environments. Blockchain automation, I think this is a very exciting area. We're able to leverage with automation different tool sets, smart contracts, security, the ability to do decentralized systems, security, transparent systems in our different environment. And then automation as a service. We have various versions of that out there. However, I just see this growing, right? So automation of processes from within the cloud. And so for some reason, for some customers, this is going to make perfect sense, right? From a cost-effective perspective. Anyone see any additional future? Anything that they're thinking about or looking at inside their environment? Anything you want to think about or talk about in this call? Feel free to make a note in the comments if you do. More than happy to come back and discuss. Okay, so just as a quick recap, the role in simplifying IT, right? We talked about that a lot. The reduction of technical debt, enhancement of scalability across their environments. And so how do you make that happen? Look at your different processes that you have. Think outside the box. Think about how, what, and where you would be able to look Look at your different orchestration platforms. Look at Ansible. Look at Terraform. Look at Adapt. We would very much like to talk to you about that. And then start with small and pilot projects, right? The value of those different projects inside your environment, the outcomes, were they what you expected, do the lessons learned, and then think about what you can do and how you can go about making those changes to make sure that as you scale this out, it's going to scale with you and drive to future capabilities within inside your organization. All right. So one of the things, next steps, just want to say thank you very much for your time. Would love to continue this conversation. And so if you would like to continue this conversation specific to your environment, please feel free to reach out. More than happy to discuss your own individual automation processes, different solutions that you're thinking about. If you want to see a demo of individual cases and capabilities, feel free to reach out to one of our lead engineers, Jason, and he'll be more than happy to spend some time with you and take you through such a demo and show you how these different tool sets can work together. Again, thank you very much for your time. That's what I wanted to cover today. Hopefully it's been a good use of your time, and please feel free to follow up with us. Thank you very much.